If your house looks old because of the popcorn walls, today I'll explain how to remove it. Let's get started. There are various popcorn texture types, and to remove it effectively, you must first identify the specific type you have. The first case we might encounter is temple popcorn texture. This popcorn texture is much easier to remove as it is of lower quality. The second one we might have is the plastic paint texture. This one is going to be a bit harder to remove, but well, we can do it anyway. To determine which type you have at home, there are several options available to find out. The first would be to take a damp cloth and pass it over the wall where we have the texture. In this case, like if we pass the cloth and it comes out whitish with a whitish color, it would be a temple texture. In the case that the cloth comes out completely clean and nothing is visible, it would be plastic paint texture. So the color of the cloth will determine whether it is one type or another. If we still don't have it 100% clear, we're going to try another little thing. We will take a clear glass and we will fill it with water. We will take a spatula and remove some pieces of this popcorn texture that we have on the wall. And when it comes into contact with the water, it can act in two ways. The first would be to dissolve in it and leave the water completely white. In this case, it would be temple popcorn texture, or it could fall to the bottom of the glass, and in this case, it would be plastic paint. With these two strategies, we can determine what our type of popcorn texture is and thus define how we are going to remove it. Let's see how we remove one type of popcorn texture and the other. First, we're going to start with the temple, which is the simplest, as I tell you, and in which we're only going to need a spritz of water and a spatula. What we're going to do is moisten it with a little bit of water, and we're going to wait a little while for it to act. And we're going to take our spatula and we're going to remove it in a simple way. In my case, I found this type of popcorn texture in the apartment and I didn't even have to put water on it, maybe in some area that was a little more stuck, so I had to put it on. In most cases, it turned out almost as if it were wallpaper, meaning it came out remarkably well. The most common thing is to find some parts much more stuck than others, so for these parts that are more stuck, we can help ourselves with water, adding, well, more quantity or waiting longer for it to take effect. If we find it very difficult or we can't quite get the hang of it, what we can do is take our spatula and dig a little corner into it so that it gets inside the texture and makes it easier for us to reach the layer behind the texture and thus be able to attack it, let's say, from the back, inserting the spatula and removing as much texture as possible. In my case, it was very easy to remove it, and I think it was for 3 reasons. That is, there were 3 things that made this texture fall off very easily. The first is that it is a floor very close to the coast, resulting in much higher humidity compared to more central floors. Away from the sea pot, let's say, the humidity, I think it has made it much easier to remove, in this case, the texture. On the other hand, we find the second thing that I think has also made the texture easier to remove. And in this case, I would say by the look of it, when I removed it, when it was applied, the wall was not completely clean. There was a lot of dust on the walls. So this caused, well, the popcorn texture not to adhere well to the wall where it was being placed, and thus, over time, it started to peel off. And finally, I think the fact that the back of the walls had some cracks that led to the outside, let in cold air and moisture. And this caused, well, the popcorn texture to also start cracking, and thus, it ended up falling off more easily. But anyway, the point is that for whatever reasons, we were able to remove all the popcorn texture in a very simple way. Once removed, we fixed the small defects that were left on the wall. We covered these cracks that caused the popcorn texture to, well, come off. And for added security, I placed a thermal insulation system on the walls that face the outside. Which later in a video I will specifically talk about this insulation system, explaining the advantages it has. Compared to installing plasterboard, we're choosing the more complex option of using plastic paint on the walls. This may sound familiar to you from the one about decorating your house. We found it in my mother's bedroom. Not only in the bedroom we found it. This popcorn ceiling. Has its journey been long? We found it in my mother's bedroom, in my parents' apartment, and on the staircase of my house. So, we have plastic paint to give and sell? This hotel is much more laborious because we can remove it with a simple spatula, but we have to cover it. And to cover it sooner, we have to take a series of steps that are going to be very important so that it's easier to cover. First, we're going to sand the gotel and we're going to remove the thickest tip so that we don't have to make it so thick. With the paste that we're going to put on it afterwards, whether it's mortar or filler. The fact of choosing an easy product to handle is very important. Well, I'll explain it to you later. But did it make a difference between removing the popcorn ceiling in my mother's bedroom and removing it in my parents' apartment? It seems like I have a lot of family, right? Once we have sanded it, we will proceed to clean. Above all, we want the wall to be very clean so we don't encounter problems when applying the putty and it doesn't come off because it's not clean. Once they are well cleaned, we will proceed with our mortar or putty. We are going to cover all our popcorn ceiling. We will wait for it to completely dry. In winter, we will wait longer than in summer because the weather is better and it will dry sooner. And once it has completely dried, we will give it a second coat if there is any imperfection left. If we see that one is enough, we can leave it like that, but you will probably have to do two. And once this second coat is finished, we would then proceed to give the entire wall a light sanding and clean it before painting. It's very important to use a sandpaper that's not too coarse, with a rather fine grain, because if we use a coarse grain one, it's possible that we might leave some scratches on the wall and it won't look completely perfect. If we want to find where the small flaws are on our wall or where we need to sand, more or less we can put a flashlight on it transversely and that way it will reveal all the flaws. Don't get depressed because you'll probably see a terrible wall and it's very difficult to make a wall completely smooth and perfect. Not even the professionals leave the walls incredibly perfect. The only thing that would make it perfect would be to put a plasterboard but on any wall in your house. Shining the flashlight across will reveal all the flaws. So don't worry, because from the front and with normal light, you're hardly going to notice this. I would rather use this flashlight to see if there is any area that we might have missed and that needs a little more work. No, maybe sand it a little more or work on it a little better. At first glance, with this it could seem like everything comes out perfect and that everything looks great. And the sad truth is that many times we encounter complications in the case of my parents' apartment. We found that there were several layers of textured paint. With the last layer being super thick, they had used the last layer to cover the previous one, which might not have been perfect. And they said, well, let's put more textured paint, a thicker textured paint. Let it show, let it sing, let you see it from afar. And of course, well, the covering thick textured paint has several issues, the main one being the need for more than 2 coats to adequately cover the texture's thickness. The second problem we encountered was the material. As I was telling you, we used a material that was not very flexible, it slid rather little and was quite difficult to apply. So this slowed down the work a lot, we spent many hours and then we had to sand a lot so that the walls would look good. Not to mention the physical effort that had to be made to be able to slide, well, the trowel and that we were working on it. At first we thought it was okay, but as we progressed in the renovation, we saw that the product, well, didn't quite convince us. In this case. On the other hand, in my mother's bedroom. I don't know if I've explained myself, but my parents' apartment is the renovation we did there, in the apartment they have on the coast and my mother's bedroom. In this case, it's also my parents, and it's where they live in their house, let's say. The point is that in this bedroom, when I was about to put up the go tele, I discovered that there was a lot of humidity under that wall, but not just a lot, and that it was the humidity on top of that. By capillarity, which is one of the most difficult to work with in this case, I spoke with a technician from Vizier, and they told me that the best thing was to place a waterproofing mortar to prevent the humidity from rising. Perhaps it's more of a temporary solution, because everything will depend on the amount of humidity we have in the room. The point and the moral of all this is that before covering the popcorn ceiling, we need to analyze how our wall is. If it needs to cover any cracks, if it needs to fix any imperfections, if it has humidity, or if we need to sand the popcorn ceiling a bit more to reduce it. Once the situation is analyzed, then we could proceed to cover our popcorn ceiling. However, I have to tell you that I have always used a preparation product, that is, I have bought the mortar separately, I have added the water, I have made the mix, and I have applied it to the wall. And I think it would have been much faster, and I would have saved time if I had bought it ready to use. They sell large containers that already come with the mix prepared. In fact, they not only cover popcorn ceilings, but also offer alternatives to conceal cracks and holes. Many ready-to-use products are available for popcorn ceilings. I think it suits us quite well, since apart from saving time, as I tell you, we have the great advantage that it is already prepared. And we don't have to start measuring the amount of water, the amount of product, because the mix has to be a specific mix, and we need to add a specific amount. So if it's already ready to use, not only are we going to take less time to prepare the mix, but it's less of a headache when it comes to preparing it. What would be the disadvantage of the ready-to-use product? First, it's quite a bit more expensive, and second, even if we cover it and close it really well, it's also not advisable to leave many weeks between the first and second application or between the second and third application. That is, the product could go past its use-by date and go bad, to put it in some way. This happens a lot. The same with micro cement, right? Once the can is opened, it needs to be applied. And if not, it could start to dry out a bit. It wouldn't have the same effectiveness as in the beginning. The third place where I told you I had plastic paint, that is plastic paint popcorn, is here in my house. And since I hadn't had time to cover it, well, I haven't had time yet, let's say the popcorn is there, so what I did was with some 3D pieces that I had left over from setting up my grandmother's house, I took them and stuck them directly on top of the popcorn to see what result it would give and to see if it could withstand over time. And the truth is that it has given me very good results. I think it's been about a year and a half, and it's still holding up. There it is, it holds up well. The thing is that these 3D plates have a kind of shine to them of cheap plastic, and I didn't like it. So what I did was paint them, and initially, well, I don't know if I could or not, but I painted them, and it has given me very good results. In the videos I've seen, they never painted it. And honestly, it removes that little white shine that I personally don't like, and the paint holds up very well on this type of material. I found it very easy to put up because it was a small wall, but I have indeed encountered that many followers commented that on large walls, it is quite complicated to put up this type of plates. So you have to keep that in mind when buying it. If the wall is very large, you might encounter some problems when trying to fit them. Not only do these types of 3D plates exist, but there are also some made of wood, paneling, or other types of materials that could help cover our popcorn ceiling without needing to remove it. However, we at home intend to remove it, so I will soon also talk about the experience we have here with the removal at home. And these would be the little tricks to get rid of our popcorn ceiling at home. I hope they have been useful to you. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. See you in upcoming videos.